to the FuturePrint Virtual Summit. I have with me a gentleman based in Boston, Massachusetts, USA, Tim Green from IDC. Tim and I have known one another for a very long time, actually. And Tim has become an expert in the field of print technology with specialities in wide formats. And we've worked together over the years on research studies and so on. I really respect his insight and knowledge. What we're here today to talk about is obviously COVID-19 and the impact on printing and those particular markets. As I said, Tim is part of the IDC group, which is a leader in research and insight. And this session is called A Tale of Two Technologies, as I mentioned already, wide format being one, a 3D being the other. We're going to use our survey as a sort of basis of discussion around the impact of COVID-19. And Tim's going to give a perspective based on the technology, but also on a kind of US market as well. I think would be interesting to hear. So welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Thanks, Marcus. And, I think I appreciate the opportunity to do this. And, I think, really important to keep information flowing and try to get people and industry, hopefully, working and get things, back to as close as we can to where we want them to be.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of like partly why we're running this summit, is so that we can share information. And if people get something from it, a bit of information or an idea, then that helps us all. Then that's a positive thing. Here's Tim's details should you want to reach out to him afterwards with any comments or thoughts or inquiries in terms of his particular business. As I said, the survey we did a survey. We spent a lot of time. It's one of those things, isn't it? In December, we wrote with Rico and commissioned a thing called the Future of Inkjet 2020, and obviously about 10 weeks ago, that became relatively not unhelpful, but equally sort of not relevant so much. So we felt we needed to update that with the context of COVID and the impact on the market to provide some insight and some help back. So we're going to use these results right now. 103 responses rather, and international, so 19 different countries represented from it. So so I think it's of the moment, so useful to use as a kind of platform to discuss things. And obviously the key headline fact is that, there's impact of COVID-19 on demand for inkjet and for print, and, quite significant in terms of the numbers there. So nearly half think 20, reduced demand by 20% and above. And I guess this is a globally recognized figure. Would you agree? Is this kind of what you're feeling in the US?
Yeah, Marcus, I think this one's, it's imperative, I think, for a couple of reasons, right? First, yes, we got to look. I think initially when we started thinking about, what's the impact of COVID-19 in the markets, initially we started thinking about it in terms of what's the impact on supply chain, right? Like, as you guys know, a tremendous amount of the products, or I shouldn't say that, but a lot of the products that are, manufactured for use in large format are manufactured in China, right? A lot of the engines, a lot of the inks, a lot of these products are made in China. And so, as the source of the virus, a lot of the thought there initially was supply chain. This is much more imperative, right? Because it implies, the impact on the, thousands and thousands of print service provider businesses. What's the impact on demand, right? And demand is, it's everything, right? Because that's talking about business volume. And so this is where we are now is, this is, it's had a huge impact in certain of these segments. I think we're going to talk a little bit about that, but this is I think a hugely important part of it, especially as you look at, sort of the mix, if you will, of hardware, Marcus, that, that drives that enables, I should say, this market, right? Because I think there's a heck of a lot of large format printing systems that can be effectively, drop shipped, right? They can still send it to you. You can plug it in and you can still start using it. That is not true in every case, right? A lot of this is big hardware that needs to have be installed by technicians on site, and then in-person training is much more effective, and so that level of activity is going to stop or slow down until we can establish some safety protocols. So that is definitely going to impact our business.
Yeah, it's a kind of inconvenient fact that we're all facing right now is it's a massive decrease in demand. We asked this question next, which was, when do you expect to see restrictions relax and normal trading resume? I guess people that fill out this survey are kind of tend to be more optimistic perhaps than the general average. But there's a lot of people here saying October 2020, and a number of optimists saying even now June. But does this kind of chime with what you're thinking? Is this kind of feel right? I mean, are we going to be going back to normal trading in October this year, do you think?
Yeah, so there's a couple. I love research, as you know, and but typically there are snapshots, right? So what somebody feels about the opportunity or the timing of recovery, I think that changes about every 4 hours, right? So generally speaking, people think, in the second half of the year things will recover. Again, geographically, I'm sure that's really different depending on, the restrictions certain states and localities put on different activities. But I'd like to focus a little bit on the word normal, right? Because, I'm not sure if normal will ever come back the way to the way things were before this happened.
Yeah.
And by that I mean, is the mix of applications going to be different? Are the applications they produce going to be different, right? So maybe, you still do a lot of point of sale stuff, graphics, but maybe those are changing, right? Because, for example, you might, if you're doing business for like grocery stores, maybe those grocery stores are going to ask you, we need different, these point of purchase materials that are different, that are, that enable safer or cashless transactions and things like that maybe you didn't have to really deal with before, but now you do.
Yeah, so it's going to be kind of a new normal. I hate that term's used a lot, but what is normal is a key thing, isn't it? Normal trading. Many people are thinking next year. Yeah. But,
yeah, right. And I mean, but if by normal, if they mean, the level of economic activity, fingers crossed, let's go. It would be great if we could say second half of this year, I like to say, like, math kind of stinks like that, right? If things take a decline by 20%, when they then grow by 20%, you're still not back to normal, right? So it takes longer to get back to a normal level of activity. So yes, I think you're looking at beyond the second half of this year.
Yeah, okay. Sectors have obviously been affected differently. Print or technology and Inkjet works across so many different markets, which gives us a nice snapshot of lots of diversity, actually. One of your key areas is obviously wide format. That's come out quite high on, number one in terms of the most badly affected.
This chart really hurts, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does look like that. Yeah, and that's because it's linked to POS and retail and.
I mean, just think about like the retail business, of course. Here in the U.S., they're talking about tens of thousands of retail locations have either closed, and some of them may not come back. Of course, the restaurant and hospitality industry is profoundly affected because of their activities are completely either closed or been modified to have, like, for example, just drive-through or just curbside service and things like that. And then, a big part of the business is trade show graphics. And, trade shows are verboten right now, so we're
Yeah.
not, that's not happening, and activity at airports is down by 90+%, right? So a lot of the businesses that supported the large format graphics business have, it's been profoundly affected.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I guess, hopefully in a positive context, when, you know, we start going out to shops and things again, that will change quickly.
I sure hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it did say it was a tale of two technologies. The next slide is almost polar opposite of that slide. So what sectors have seen an increase in demand? We've got medical and pharmaceutical coming out high for obvious reasons, I think, and packaging as well, because online retail is still going, corrugated is doing well, and so on. But 3D printing comes out high, I think, as previously it's not been high on the charts at all, really. Why is that?
Yeah. So, I think the 3D printing industry is, that's a big part of what I do. And 3D printing has been, the industry has come together in an amazing way to support the production of personal protective equipment. There's examples of companies that are doing, in fact, there's examples of large format companies too that have sort of modified what they do to say, like, hey, we can make these masks, we can make these ventilator parts, we can make these, but in 3D printing, you also get the opportunity to do, testing swabs and other materials that support COVID testing. And so, 3D printing has been really, it's been amazing. The manufacturers of the equipment have been great. I think the resellers have been fantastic in terms of trying to support these. And of course, the many, literally thousands of people who have 3D printers, everything from, little desktop devices to real industrial, 3D printing farms have been able to dedicate some of their capacity to manufacturing of products to fight the COVID virus. And so that's been, I think, great. Additionally, as a big part of this market, like 90+% of the 3D printing business is in what we call material deposition or fused filament kind of fabrication. And a lot of those products are used by individual engineers who are working from home and are able to, quickly and rapidly iterate. And as one of the effects of this virus is that so many people are working from home, in some ways, 3D printing is enabling some of that, work from home capacity.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I hadn't considered that. And I think one of the 3D printing's stories prior to this was, it will be a great technology in times of crisis and emergencies. But nobody really had any examples of that. And of course, there's no greater example of how useful it is right now. And it's it's a positive thing. It's providing help, but equally showcasing what it can do, which is, like you say, things go through hype. I think you said before, 3D printing has been a classic hype technology, hasn't it? And
yes,
but it seems to be coming out of that.
Now, in many ways, and I think my belief is that there was, if you were exposed to 3D printing technology, even maybe 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, even more recently, you might have some idea about, that's that's for making trinkets, right? Or that's strictly for prototyping. But it's not, it's simply not true anymore. I mean, like the technology has come so far, so fast, and continues to develop at that rate. Like whether it's materials or, they're using engineering grade materials all over the place, right? You can use engineering grade materials on a 3D printer that costs only a couple $1,000s, right? So it's not, a huge investment to get a very high quality 3D printer. Also, there used to be you had to be a mechanical engineer or somebody who was really into the technology to be able to use these printers effectively. That's also not true anymore. They're making them much easier to use. So the quality, the cost, the ease of use, the speed, that's another
Mm.
thing. I mean, these 3D printers are much faster than they used to be.
Mm.
And so, if you haven't been exposed to some of this 3D technology recently, there's a lot to know of, and you got to get up to date because it can be incredibly useful.
Yeah, that's positive, thanks. And for the future, so you have a counterbalance with your wide format there, haven't you? So yeah, it's a good thing. Next one was how we are sort of, generally, how have you responded to the crisis in a business context? Can't really see the answers there. We'll go on to the next slide. But again, I think the positive nature of the pool of people that tend to respond to these surveys is that, they're using the time to collaborate and innovate. And I talked to people about this result before and said, oh, it's nice, people are using this time to be creative. And some people are saying, well, actually, isn't it a necessity?
Yeah. Well, as you know, I mean, I have tremendous respect for the entrepreneurs who operate these businesses, these printing businesses and these service bureaus. And so, it's always amazing to me that, in fact, if you talk to any equipment manufacturer, many of them will tell you, people are using our technology to do things that we never would have thought of, right? And this is true in the large format business, true in the 3D printing business, right? There's an amazing variety of applications that people can produce. And so people think about, what can we do to the machine or what can we do with our capabilities, to innovate. And to that, I would say, I would also add, when there's slow times in business, that's the time to, I use the term sharpen the axe, right? That's the time to organize the shop from a workflow perspective. That's the time to do some customer analysis and see what you're really good at and what drives profitability and what drives growth in your industry and for your individual business. And maybe spend some time sort of thinking about how you focus on those things that are more rewarding and things that have higher levels of potential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is an opportunity to use the time. What do you expect to see permanently change once lockdown eases? So high on this was we'll attend more virtual meetings and events like we're doing now. Well, clearly you can't really attend a physical event, so that's technology's there, and maybe it's not perfect, but it's going to be exploited.
Well, we talked about travel too, right, Marcus? Like a big thing is, even if there's a somewhat of a snapback in terms of economic activity once the lockdown eases, are people going to travel the way they used to, right? Or so I think that's it really is a very important element of right, because travel means that you're staying in hotels and you're going to restaurants and things like that, and that drives some of this activity as well. So yes, but again, people have restrictions on travel, meaning, right, either they're saving the money from it or just maybe fewer people go, right? So for example, like when we go to an industry event, maybe a half a dozen IDC people might go to some of these events, like a FESPA or something, or an SGIA, or now Printing United event. Probably fewer people will go to these. Will go to these in the future.
Yeah, and I think it's sad in a way. They did such a great last year was such a positive, particularly with Printing United, a very positive kind of energy about the industry, and it's tough that it's to be followed by this. But anyway, it is what it is, unfortunately. But there's clearly a reduction in business travel, and as you say, it's down to personal choice as well as corporate sort of policy,
That's
isn't
true.
it? It's kind of like, well, do you want to go? I don't think I do. Right now, I don't really want to go anywhere. Yeah. That's the difficulty.
But remote working is a big one, right? Like I said, that I think that's going to have an important impact, especially when you think about like our business, right? So if you're a manufacturer who makes, let's say, relatively low end graphics equipment or relatively low end 3D printing equipment, right? The ability to just sort of drop ship some of that stuff into a location and have the people use it an individual person like yourself or me, we have, both of us have a desktop printer, right?
Mm.
So if you're an engineer, you probably need it to make, CAD designs, or and if you're, in the 3D printing, to make some of the iterated products that you're designing. If you're selling big iron, the impact is more profound, right? Because you don't have the opportunity to do the in-person sales calls. Of course, everybody's doing these virtual meetings and stuff like that, but to really get in and install the equipment, some of this high speed and industrial sized equipment, you got to have people who come to your building and come to your shop and do the application training and train the operator. And that part of our business certainly that's going to take a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think the challenges for general manufacturing and the retail supply chain will lead to any of the following? So that meaning that some of the supply chains have struggled, at least initially, to deliver certain goods into shops, but not only that, sort of general manufacturing that has found it difficult, and to get goods into certain, particularly in Europe, certain borders were shut. How's that affecting things? And responses here: expect to see an increase in digital manufacturing, by that meaning automation and Industry 4.0, that kind of thing, to help solve supply problems. There certainly seems to be a sense to which some people are saying, yeah, maybe we'll see an acceleration of change.
Yeah, I firmly, I think this one is spot on. In some ways, this crisis is driving a sort of reevaluation of these of the supply chain, right? To say like, maybe we should have been making that stuff here ourselves, or maybe we shouldn't be so reliant on centralized manufacturing, and perhaps it's more efficient if we have capacity to do some of this, either printing, or maybe we think about how to outsource in a different way, so that we're able to drive some additional profitability, or at least to manage costs better, right? So maybe I don't have to have a warehouse full of media for jobs that don't drive that activity. Maybe I have to just think about I outsource certain types of production. Or maybe you say, I've been outsourcing this, I can reclaim that business and be more self-reliant, and then I do that activity myself, right? So, for example, like if you're fabric printing, if you've been outsourcing fabric printing, maybe now's the time to say, hey, there's a lot of options for me to do that myself, and I have to, maybe I got to learn some new color management. Maybe I got to have some additional finishing capabilities, but at least I don't have to wait, the time I might have had to wait in order to do that. And also, it gives you a level of service that maybe you didn't have in the past. This is, I think, and again, this one again, sort of, especially in the 3D printing business, where I think in many cases already companies are saying, look, we get tremendous advantages by using 3D printing for rapid prototyping. Is there other ways to exploit that technology to make higher volumes of products and parts that we can that we don't have to outsource, and we don't have to be reliant outside of our own company? And so I think this is in many ways an opportunity for 3D printing, to prove its viability in a real manufacturing setting.
Yeah, and that's like you say, and it's accelerating perhaps what is already possible, but making it, because and I guess it links a little to the next slide. We're sort of asking what consumer trends do you think will grow, and we'll talk about more than this, but comes through in this, and certainly I find it myself, is that localization, both of being able to serve your local area more effectively, and consumers wanting to buy more local, or having to buy more locally, if that makes sense.
Marcus, I think this slide is, it should be really, anyone who's thinking about their business going forward's got to look at this one, right? Because you can say like, all of these will have some impact. What impact will it have that remote working will become more normal, right? If you're making large format, or you're making 3D printing products, you got to think about that. Because again, it will impact, are your remote employees, do they have all the capability or capacity that they have in the office? Or are you going to make some kind of workflow so that they can still submit jobs from wherever they are and get the materials they need, or get the, if it's a 3D printing, or if it's the prototypes that they need, do they have the capacity to do that wherever they are? And think about this health, hygiene, and medical segment, like in how the retail business is changing, right? So, if you think about, if you're supporting retailers, if you're supporting grocery stores with like point of purchase materials and in-store graphics, how's that stuff going to change, right? So I think, for example, we're going to see a lot more stations where hand sanitizer is dispensed. You're going to see graphics and signage that sort of enable a lot more cashless transactions, right? And if you're that kind of printing company, it would be great if, I think it would be smart to sort of be proactive about it and go to those customers of yours and say, look, we can do that, right? We can help you. Or in fact, we already have designs for some cashless transaction stations, or, more hygienic in-store shopper experiences, or what have you, right? To give the retailer some sense that, you're not only there to support them, but you're actually enabled, there
new possibilities,
to drive them, to lead them exactly where they want to go anyway.
Yeah, and there's some creativity can be deployed there, where you can still get branding from it and branding value, but actually providing a service that is helpful right now.
Absolutely.
There is that, and like you say, it takes I think it's about being proactive and trying things out, and
just like your chart, your slide says, go to like greater focus on buying localized products, right? How about all these, locally sourced? You're going to want to have a lot of signage and graphics that indicates those things, that maybe, maybe you did it before, but now you're really going to want to focus on it because 60% of people are saying that they want to buy local more often, right? And, and you're going to want to have markers for social distancing, and you're going to want to have dividing spots. And, already we're seeing places like restaurants and casinos and grocery stores, they're putting up these like sneeze guards, right? Because they want, when business comes back, it's going to look a little different. People are going to have a little more sensitivity to, to the putting their hands on stuff, right? And and so that kind of thing ultimately will probably be decorated in some kind of way, right? Like you said, either with branding or with signage saying like, don't touch this, or, keep your hands back, or stand this far apart. And those kinds of, I think those kinds of products are going to be where, where demand is. When
I don't know if you've seen this, I'm seeing a lot of floor graphics in stores at the moment. Obviously, partly
for sure.
People are looking.
Marcus, I see a lot of them too. Like I was at the grocery store myself the other day, and in front of the grocery store, they had a bunch of the shopping carts turned over, and there was a directional signage that was literally stuck together with colored masking tape saying, go this way and then go this way. But over time, people are going to, these stores are going to want something better than that, right? There's going to be dividers saying, we want you to walk this way down the aisle. We want you to, come this way into the store so that you're not, coming within a certain distance of other people. And in some way, maybe that's not permanent. Maybe those change over, right? And maybe eventually they disappear as hopefully once there's more vaccines and testing and stuff like that. But in the short term, these makeshift signs and graphics, they're not going to work, right? Eventually you're going to want to have, the same floor graphics that have like slip proof floor graphics that you've probably had all along, and some of those social distancing markers are going to be one you're going to want to have your brand or your logo or something on there that's
Yeah.
That's a little more valuable than just masking tape.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of concludes the actual slide elements. So it's going to, I think, cover quite a lot of ground there. Have you got kind of any sort of perhaps closing thoughts, or you might want to share? I mean, it's obviously a market under stress, even if increased demand means stress, doesn't it? As well as it does, it's a nice problem in a way, but equally it's like still a challenge, and equally on the other side. So it's about adapting and responding and trying things out and moving forward as much as possible, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you said sort of one of the key words is creativity, right? Like the people who start these, like I said, I've met a lot of them, and I have tremendous respect for the people who run these printing businesses and service bureaus, and so many of them got to where they are because they're super smart, really creative, and work super hard. And so, in some ways, this is kind of a restart. It's a shock to the system, but it's a bit of a restart. And you got to say, what things can we do now, right? How do we have to change now in order to adapt? And there's going to be, once we've done some of the stuff that I mentioned about, sharpen the axe, think about workflow, talk about doing some customer analysis, think about where your profits have been historically, and then, how can you apply your own creativity and diligence to kind of continue to make a recovery happen? And so, already, I'm sure you've seen it. I've definitely seen it. There's companies who are contributing in fantastic ways, either making PPE or doing very rapid store changeovers as some of these stores and retail stores and places open up. And so you've got to apply that creativity and diligence, kind of do it all over again to redesign products that kind of set a new, for the new ways people are going to want to do business. That's things like I said, cashless transactions and, let's say, more hygienic shopping experiences and things like that.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks so much, Tim. That's excellent. I really appreciate you joining us for this, and
of course,
and look forward to doing it again in the future. Thank you.